Welcome to Pulse Check, where we have quick conversations about how to help people across Alabama live healthier lives. Today, we're diving into behavior, mental health, and the way our environments, relationships, and life experiences shape the way we respond to the world around us. Joining me is Dr. Beth Long, founder of Works of Wonder. Dr. Long holds a doctorate in counseling psychology and has more than 20 years of experience working with individuals and families. She's both a licensed professional counselor and a board-certified behavior analyst. What makes her approach especially interesting is that she views many behavioral struggles not as character flaws, but as skill deficits, skills that may never have been taught, supported, or reinforced. Dr. Long, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I think it's going to be a great conversation and so timely because we're seeing this more and more, and I know that you are as well in your field. The one thing that really stood out to me in your bio is the idea that struggles are skill deficits, not character flaws. Can you explain more about what you mean by that?
Yes. So I really truly believe that is something that we used to understand as a community of people, that skill deficits are the seminal problem, not a character flaw or a psychological disorder, because really on a base level, the problem is the skill deficit. So we've kind of shifted away from that belief and that theory, and it has left us as families, as people, feeling very helpless. And so let me give you a simple example of myself this week. I really have a skill deficit when it comes to confronting people with hard topics. So there's lots of stress in my life that does not have to be there, but I have to take the time to learn how to have healthy confrontation. And so I could blame that on a lot of things. I could blame it on the people around me. I could say, oh, it's my anxiety, but there's a million ways I could blame. But the truth is, I have to learn how to have healthy confrontation. And so you can break that all the way down to, this child doesn't like doing his work because he doesn't know how to hold a pencil without his hand hurting. Or this child is not being manipulative. They don't know how to communicate effectively. So if we look at the skill deficit below the problem that we see, it changes our perspective in every way.
That's a great point. And I've heard it said that behavior is a language. It's its own separate language. So when somebody, especially a child, is acting out, or what we call acting out, what behavior is that often communicating?
About 99% of the time when a child is acting out, it's communicating, I can't communicate with words. So if I have a child who bites every time they don't get what they want, they truly don't know how to say, I would like this. And I'm not saying they don't know how to use the words. They don't know how to use the words in that moment of frustration, and biting is easier.
A lot of parents feel like challenging behavior, like biting, means that they're failing somehow. What would you say to those parents?
First of all, I feel so sorry for parents today because it's information overwhelm all the time. Right? There's so many different opinions and so many different voices. And I wish I could silence all the voices for every parent and say, you're not failing. Your child is being a child and they don't know what to do yet. You're only failing if you don't realize, this is just something I have to teach them. That's when we fail ourselves, our children, one another.
I see that a lot as well, even in adult relationships, just like you mentioned before. We all have skill deficits, even into our adulthood. And sometimes a little patience and a little digging in helps our adult relationships. I don't know why it's hard to see that, in a child that you're taking care of or in your own child. I think it's about the reframe. So how can parents and caregivers reframe this child is misbehaving to this child is distressed for some reason I may not be aware of, and they're trying to communicate that with me the best way they know how, so that the parent or caregiver can help regulate the child's nervous system in the moment, instead of seeing it as, this child's acting out, this child's not listening to me, this child's not following my directions. How can a parent or caregiver just reframe that so they can take a breath, right, and kind of start over?
I think the biggest way that we can help in the moment, because you asked specifically about in the moment, I think the biggest way that we can help in those difficult moments is understand that we don't have to solve the problem in the moment. So if I have a child who's throwing items across the room, I can stop them from throwing items across the room, but that doesn't mean that I need to teach them not to stop throwing items across the room in that moment, right? And I think that's when we as adults, the child is obviously already emotionally dysregulated, but that's when our emotional dysregulation comes into play because we feel all this pressure to do more than stop. So I think that's one of the biggest issues is it's okay to stop bad behavior in the moment and then come back and deal with it later, even if you have a 3-year-old. And I feel like we've taught a lot of people, you have to deal with it right then. I'm not emotionally mature enough to deal with things right then a lot of the time. So stop bad behavior and then sit back and think what caused it, what skill did the child not have, a really logical conversation with yourself of what is missing and how can I teach it instead of, oh, my child is so destructive, you know.
It's been said that it takes 7 times, hearing something 7 times before it gets internalized into our own system. And so I like that point of stop the behavior and then circle back, remind, teach, train 7 times plus, especially with littles, that the reasons for not continuing that behavior and a better way to handle something. I think a lot of people do think I'm going to stop the behavior and solve it immediately for the rest of time. And that's not the case. We have to hear it. We have to learn it, see it, touch it, feel it at least 7 times.
Mhm.
We talked about adults. How do some of these skill deficits show up in adults?
Well, can I go back and talk about the 7
Of
times?
course.
I laughed when you said 7 times because I think that is for the perfect people. I think I personally have to experience something much more than 7 times to learn how to master it. So I always tell parents it takes about 2,000 repetitions for a child to truly change their behavior. And a lot of parents will just tell their children. A lot of us don't learn just because we've heard it. We learn it because we've experienced it. And so anyway, I just think 7 is an extremely generous number for behavior change.
I set the bar low. 2,000 times. Okay. And it needs to be seen, witnessed, demonstrated, as well as told, right?
And practice. And that's where I think most people go wrong is they talk, they show, they talk some more, but they never set into place a situation for the child to practice and practice and practice doing what they should have done.
I love that word practice because it takes away the pressure to get it right and be perfect the first time. And just reminding, like, hey, we're practicing this. We're not going to be great at it. That's okay. We're just practicing it because, like anything else, you're playing ball. You got to throw that ball 2,000 times, definitely more than 7 to get really good at it. All right. Well, thank you for clarifying that point. That was really helpful and important. Back to adults. So let's say, a child has experienced behavior deficits in their upbringing, then they grow up, they're 18, they're 22, and now they're working. How do some of those skill deficits show up in adults?
I will answer how they show up in adults. And then I want to go into why I think it's worse than it's ever been, at least in my lifetime. I don't want to say it's worse than it's been forever, but it's worse than it's been in my lifetime. So, for example, if you have a child who struggles with apologizing, okay, that's a skill they didn't learn in childhood, and then they go into the workforce and they don't know how to own what they did wrong, and then they might get fired, or they might not be, their employers may not think they're willing to learn to do it differently because they aren't sorry, and so therefore I would assume you don't know that what you did is wrong. So that's just a very simple example, but if also one of the biggest ones that I focus on a lot lately because I think I'm going to really go into this one. Okay. So another one is I always teach parents one of the most important skills they have to teach their children is to ask permission for everything. And very, very, very few families make their children ask permission for everything. Most children have access to a lot without communicating with anyone. Okay. So a lot of kids are able to go pick up a toy and play with it without talking to someone. And this is a very extreme example, but let me tell you what's happening in schools and in workplaces because we're not doing this at home. So at school, a child may want a drink and they just hop up out of their chair to go get a drink. Well, they're going to get in trouble because they didn't ask the teacher if they could go get a drink, right? Now, in the workplace, I see this a lot in the younger generations than me, which is a lot. But the younger generations, those people have a great idea. They do not communicate it with anyone and they move forward with it. And then they get in trouble because they followed through on this great idea. It would have changed everything if they had stopped and communicated, because it is probably a great idea, but it needed a little more opinions of other people to follow through well. But we've raised a lot of people who are more independent than they are communicative, and it's causing a lot of problems.
So, that one seemingly small step of teaching your child from a young age to ask for permission first can really impact throughout their life. Psychologically, that skill
Yes.
of checking in, communicating, letting somebody know, getting other people's buy-in ahead of time, or just sharing information so that you can produce the best result later.
Right, right. Or simple marital arguments over, well, I didn't know you were going to stop by the store, and you both stopped by the store and bought milk or whatever. That one simple thing truly does impact the rest of a person's life.
Well, you talk a lot about behavior through a systems-based lens. How much do environment and relationships shape behavior?
That is a dissertation question right there. um, environment and relationships impact almost every part of behavior. So if I grow up in an environment, like I grew up in a very emotional home. Everybody in my family we are not afraid to be emotional in any way, shape, or form. So, however, we often leave with that. I did not grow up in a logical home. So I didn't learn to stop and think before I reacted. So that impacted it. And then I got in trouble at school because I didn't learn to stop and think before I reacted. And so then I internalized, well, I'm the bad kid. So um our environment, good, bad, everything in between, shapes who we become. And then also the system, how the system thinks, how the system believes, how the system perceives, shapes how we see everything. So I really feel like we decided a long time ago to go into a diagnostic approach to problems. And then because we went towards a diagnostic approach, what happened is we became accommodating. Well, the problem with accommodation is I'm lowering the bar. I'm not helping the child reach the bar. So that system has hurt a lot of people because we had the mentality of they can't learn it instead of I have to work a lot harder for them to learn it. So that system kind of hurt everything. And then relationship, if I feel safe with you, that is going to shape my entire life, knowing that I have one person where I can 100% be myself and still be loved. And a lot of people don't have that one person. And a lot of people have 100 of those people. But that it's going to play a part in who we become as adults.
Yeah, I think one of the sadder things that I see is when somebody uses shame, and that could be not just with their children, it could be in an adult environment, in a work environment. How does shame shape behavior, and why is it so ineffective
So
at
shame,
changing behavior?
so shame is the belief that I am bad. Shame is horribly unhealthy, right? And we do shame people a lot. So it would be saying something like, if your child spilled a cup of water, you're so clumsy, as opposed to next time be more careful. Very, very different responses. But shame, we internalize, I am bad. Guilt is very healthy because guilt helps us go, I made a mistake. I did that wrong. I need to do better, and we have power over that. We have no power over shame. And so if you're raised in an environment where there's a lot of shame, your internal dialogue is, I'm a victim. I have no power over this. I can't do anything. I always fail. If you're raised in a situation where everything is just a mistake and we got to teach you how to do it better, you have a lot more control with that. You have a lot more humility. You have the ability to say, oh, I can learn how to do this. So shame is a huge problem in almost every situation.
We talk about behavior and getting anyone to behave the way that you think that they should behave in a moment. We kind of get stuck in a reactive state where the behavior has happened and now I've got to react to it. What are some ways that a parent, caregiver, or boss or coworker, what are some ways a person can intentionally get ahead of that, like, and teach those proper ways to behave? You mentioned asking permission. That's a great example of that. Are there other things that somebody can do? We'll just keep it to parents and caregivers to get proactive in shaping behavior?
The two biggest things that parents can do proactively, and they should be doing this from birth, is the first one is everything that they are asking the child to do, they need to follow through and make sure it happens. Okay. So if I say to a child, this would be maybe like a 2 or 3-year-old child, put on your shoes. I am going to help them put on their shoes, right? What I see happening where people are being reactive and not proactive is they go to put on the child's shoes and the child starts crying and they focus on the child crying and not the child putting on the shoes. So proactively, what we can do is stay focused on the task because it's okay that the child doesn't like it, but I want them to learn, even when I'm upset, I have to do the right thing. So when we react to the emotion or to the destruction or to the aggression or whatever else is not task completion, we are truly taking the ship and throwing it way off course. So one of the most proactive things we can do is stay focused on that. Be loving, be kind, be patient, be helpful, be all of those things, but stay focused on the task. The second thing, which I already mentioned, is asking permission, because that teaches perfect communication skills over time, right? Because as I'm growing up, if I'm nervous about asking permission, I learn how to be brave and ask hard questions. If I really have a different opinion from what my parents are doing, the stage has been set for me to go to my parents and have a conversation, not speak out the window and do what I want to do. So having children do those two things is a big game changer. And I thought of that maybe 4 years ago now. And every single day at work, I kind of go, does this fall outside of my theory? Does this fall outside of I have yet to, like, it really comes down to those two important things. But then the third thing is every problem is simply a skill deficit. And that's it. It's that simple. So if I have a child who has huge emotional reactions, they don't know how to handle being told no. They don't know how to handle um, being frustrated. They don't know how to persevere when things are hard. And I'm going to sit down and really practice, practice, practice. So if I have a child who doesn't handle being told no well, number one, that means people didn't teach them to ask permission. Because, right, when you ask permission for everything, you're told yes and no a lot. So you're naturally okay with it. If I have a child who has huge emotional reactions, we're going to play a lot of board games. A lot. Because board games bring out the worst in all of us. But I'm going to say ahead of time, okay, I might win this game and it really might upset you. So I want you to run over to that chair and take some deep breaths. And then we're going to calm down and come back and try it again. And when that moment happens, I'm right there to coach them and encourage them. What I'm not doing is doing that in the middle of target when I'm overwhelmed and frustrated and stressed out, which that's going to happen anyway. But that proactive practice is a game changer.
I love that. So it's a way to, over time, help a child build that skill set because in the beginning, it might just be as simple as may I. But as time goes on, then they learn how to negotiate. They learn how to compromise. They learn how to present their case as the years go by, those are also valuable in adult world for sure.
Yes, yes. I'm still working on those skills. I want to learn this.
Well, how do you think modern stressors like social media are impacting emotional regulation and behavior, especially in kids?
Okay. I have lots of opinions on how modern stressors are impacting children. Let's take social media, for example. Okay. So I think two big things. One is we are distracted. I know the age of your children, so I know your children didn't grow up. They weren't young children when smartphones were around. My children weren't young children when smartphones were around. We are the last generation that had toddlers that didn't stare at the back of a phone. And I'm so thankful for that. And I'm so sorry for everybody who came after us. But we weren't made to be accessible 24 hours a day. But we've created a world where people expect a text back, a response back, So really setting strong limits around when I am at home, I'm going to put this on the counter and walk away. And I may come back for 5 minutes every hour and double check, but that's it. I'm not going to carry it with me. I'm not going to stare at it. And then, with social media, I personally do not have social media because I am not mature enough to handle social media well. I'm one of those people who I can scroll and I look up and I've lost an hour. I'm not going to waste an hour of my life, but that just means I don't have it on my phone. Because I'm not mature enough to look. Then the other stressor is you have so many voices with so many opinions and they all sound great. but then you're just confused when it's time to take action. And so we aren't meant to have that many voices telling us what to do. And that causes so much stress. And, I try to be healthy, but there's so many ways to be healthy and things to do to be healthy, and they often contradict each other. And so I'm overwhelmed by it. I can't imagine being the parent of a 2-year-old and trying to parent with that many voices.
I can't imagine if I had to go back in time, because like you said, with our kids' ages, we had to get on the floor. We were the screen, right?
We were.
And it was a lot of fun, but it was a lot of time and attention and intentionality and setting things up. And like you said, playing board games. And I really love that the thought of that. Something my boss has been saying around here lately to us as adults is, I need you guys to get bored. I need you guys to be a little bit bored, because the best ideas, the best innovations come from boredom, from sitting and thinking. And we're practicing that around here as a strategy. So it's interesting to talk about it with kiddos, and the fact that no one was meant to be accessible 24/7, and no one was meant to hear this many voices and opinions about what they should or shouldn't be doing. So it sounds like just limiting those things, limiting the voices, pulling away the screen time, can have a really positive impact on your mental health, especially your child's mental health and behavior as well.
Yes, yes, yes. And then, yeah, and if we look at teenagers who are given access to social media, that's a hard enough season of life when they see what their friends are doing that they weren't included in, right? Then we have a lot of rejection issues. But if we see, well, oh, I'm supposed to be doing this, I'm supposed to be doing this, right? The adults are not mature enough for it. The teenagers are definitely mature enough.
I still remember to this day this might have been when I was 14, a group of us had agreed that one friend's dad was going to take us all to school. It was our first day of high school, right? So we were leaving junior high. We were going to be at the high school. So I may have been 15. And I kept waiting on that ride. I kept waiting on that ride. It never came. I called the house, and the mom answered and said, "Oh, he took him to school, a while back." Come to find out, they had added a person, and then there wasn't room for me. And so I just wasn't picked up. And at the last minute, I had to find another ride. And I can laugh about it now, but I remember being so devastated and embarrassed. And so now with social media and teenagers, just imagine that type of thing, or feeling like that type of thing happened over and over. I can't even imagine the psychological devastation.
No, no, yeah. We are not, what other people do is none of our business.
I love that. That's such a great quote. That's so true. Well, if somebody is listening and they feel overwhelmed by behavior challenges in their home, where should they start?
Honestly, for one, do those 3 things. Make sure your child's doing what you ask them, teach them to ask permission, and then practice all the skills. Yesterday I met with a family, and they were teaching their son how to tie his shoes, but every time he tied his shoes, he would have a meltdown. And so they stopped teaching him to tie his shoes. That's when you should lean in, not step back. So confront the problem head on. Okay, we're going to learn how to do this together. It's okay that you're frustrated. It's okay that you're overwhelmed. The more we do this, the better you're going to get, and the less frustrated you're going to be. I think a lot of parents accidentally begin walking on eggshells. So those 3 things. I have a clinic named Works of Wonder. It's in Montgomery. There are several clinicians that are amazing and wonderful and helpful in working with families and addressing behaviors. And we spend a lot of time with parents, more time with parents than children, because we are all imperfect parents. I'm a horrifically imperfect parent. But the healthier I get, the healthier my children get. Staying really focused on, I need to be the healthiest parent I can be to help my child, not my child is a problem and they need a lot of help. Having that mentality will change everything.
I think that's something a lot of people don't want to face. And you mentioned being an imperfect parent. I know if I could go back in time, because I definitely was that parent that tried to teach you to tie shoes. And when I couldn't communicate it well enough, I just bought the Velcro shoes and we moved on with life. I don't even know if they know how to tie their shoes to this day. So we just bought different shoes. But last question, what is something that you think people misunderstand about progress in therapy as it relates to behavior change and the amount of time it might take? You said the 2,000 times earlier. What does that look like? Is that a week? Is that a month? Is that a day? We're such a fast food culture. And if we detect a problem or a threat, we want it handled right now. How long does this take to change behavior?
Okay. True behavior change takes a long time. It takes a long time. It takes much longer than any of us want to admit. And it's not a straight line. A little bit of progress, a lot of regression, a little bit of progress, a lot of regression. And sometimes we spin in circles for a little while. But over time, the change is happening and it's slow. And if we don't pay very close attention, we don't see it. So a lot of people do want the fast food solution, and it's just not. Behavior change is lifelong. It's a lifelong process. So two important factors are it takes a lot of repetition. Every human learns from repetition. That's the best teacher of everyone. So setting yourself up in a situation to learn and practice what you need to do, the more repetition, the faster the learning. So if I have a child who really hates being separated from their parents, like at Sunday school and church, if I only work on that Sunday morning, it's going to take 3 years. But if I go and I spend one Sunday morning walking into that Sunday school classroom, dropping off my child, hanging out with them for a second, leaving, coming back, leaving, coming back, helping them understand mom's coming back. Typically, people only have to do that 1 or 2 Sundays, but don't wait for life to present itself to teach your child what they need to learn or to teach yourself what you need to learn. I'm trying to learn to have confrontational conversations. I'm not going to wait until a confrontation happens to have those conversations because I have to practice it a lot more. So every time I read it in a book or I see it on TV, now I go, okay, here's how I would have handled that. Here's what I should have done. And I'm rehearsing how to do that, the repetition. The other thing is recognition. The recognition comes first. In children, the repetition causes the recognition. And in adults, I think they happen at the same time. So if I have a child and I'm attempting to teach them how to tie their shoe, the repetition of how to do it, that's what will help them recognize my shoe is untied. I need to tie it. Okay. So that's how it works in children. Adults, I think we learn how to tie our shoe when we recognize it needs to be tied about the same time. But in children, a lot of adults expect them to recognize it before the repetition happens. They're not going to embrace that the repetition has to happen first. But for adults, when we're working on behavior change, recognition is about 60% of the battle. If I know that what I did was wrong, that's 60% of it. And me going, I'm so sorry. Let's learn how to do this differently. That doesn't mean I'm not going to blow it the next day, but it means I know I'm wrong and I'm trying my hardest to learn to do it differently. That is what takes the longest time. But if you're in a therapeutic relationship with yourself or with someone else, or you're trying to figure out if someone is healthy, their ability to recognize that they were wrong is the difference between healthy and not healthy.
I saw this recently on another reel, another podcast, but I thought it was so great. The person said, if you take a china plate and you smash it on the floor, and then you say to the plate, I'm so sorry that I smashed you on the floor, the plate doesn't put itself back together. And so it's really important to get ahead of that behavior, recognize it in yourself, prepare for it, practice how to do it better, like you mentioned, and then just exercise it over and over again. And I like what you said about behavior takes a long time to change because we as adults are still trying to change our behavior in
Yes,
a lot of ways.
yes, yes. I do want to, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
One of the biggest things, I started doing this about 6 years ago, is I have a line a day journal, and it'll have like 3 years on top of each other. So and I will look. I write about my children. I have multiple journals, so I write about my children, I write about my husband, I write about myself. But it's one sentence a day. Think if I was not doing that, I would have missed all of the progress I've made, my children have made, my husband has made. Because in everyday life, you don't see it. You only see it when you can look back and truly see how different things were. So I think people do need to take a lot more time, like taking data, like truly making a way to understand how much change is happening, but it's so slow you miss it. You don't see it.
It's slow. You miss it unless you're intentional about capturing, like you said, those various data points. Well, is there anything that you wanted to cover that we didn't cover? Is there something that I should have asked you? What are you excited about or passionate about right now at this moment?
So one of the biggest questions that I often get asked is, how do I potty train my child? Especially, well, that's for any child, but especially for children of families who have, or especially for families who have children with developmental delays. They have a really hard time potty training. So because I answer that question so much, I created a 9-module course that goes into everything you can imagine about potty training from A to Z. So like preparing yourself, preparing your home, how to communicate with a nonverbal child during the potty training process, all of that. And we are so excited about it. And you can just look on our social media, Works of Wonder Therapy or Dr. Beth Long. to see that course.
Perfect. Well, that's what I was going to ask you is the website and how people can find you. So say that one more time.
Okay, so on most social medias, I'm Dr. Beth Long. Our website is worksofwondertherapy.com. And then we also have social media for the clinic, which is Works of Wonder Therapy on all the main social medias.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for being here. I feel like we covered a lot. We came up with several things that people can do today if they haven't already started to improve behavior. And I really, really appreciate your time and your expertise and your patience. And for the viewer, if you're watching and you want to learn more, hear more stories like this one, you can visit alabamapulsemagazine.com. And if you have any ideas on who we should talk to, what topics we should cover, please leave a note in the comments. And thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you.